The massive starship glided through the inky blackness of space, its sleek obsidian hull reflecting distant starlight. Captain Lyra Voss stood on the command deck of the Zortak Collective's most advanced reconnaissance vessel, her multiple eyes scanning the holographic display that dominated the center of the bridge. Earth hung before them, a blue-green marble suspended in the void, seemingly fragile and insignificant. "Preliminary scans complete," announced the ship's primary intelligence officer, his voice a low mechanical hum. "Technological development appears consistent with pre-stellar civilization. Defensive capabilities minimal. Recommended approach, standard planetary acquisition protocol." Voss allowed herself a small smile. She had overseen hundreds of planetary integrations during her long career. This would be no different. A simple process of identification, communication, and eventual submission. The Zortak Collective had perfected this method over centuries, absorbing emerging civilizations with surgical precision. Unbeknownst to the alien crew, their approach was anything but unnoticed. Deep beneath the surface of Earth, in a facility carved into the bedrock of the Colorado Mountains, a network of quantum computers hummed with intense activity. The Global Planetary Defense Command, GPDC, had been preparing for this moment for decades. What appeared to be a simple research facility was actually the nerve center of humanity's most ambitious defensive strategy. Dr. Elena Rodriguez leaned forward, her fingers dancing across holographic interfaces that seemed to breathe with living intelligence. Years of preparation, billions in funding, and the combined efforts of the world's best minds had created something far beyond a simple military defense system. "Contact confirmed," she spoke softly into her communication link. "Unknown vessel approaching. Configuration matches previous deep space reconnaissance patterns." Screens around her lit up with a cascade of information. Quantum sensors mapped every millimeter of the approaching ship. Computational models predicted potential approach vectors, communication strategies, and defensive requirements with near-instantaneous calculation. In orbital stations and underground facilities across the planet, teams of specialists began their carefully choreographed response. This was not a moment of panic, but of calculated preparation. Humanity had long ago decided that if first contact were to occur, it would be on their terms. The Zortak ship continued its approach, completely unaware of the intricate web being woven around it. Its advanced scanning technologies probed the planet, searching for weaknesses, potential resource points, and defensive capabilities. What they found seemed to confirm their initial assessment, a planet ripe for acquisition. But appearances can be deceiving. In Tokyo, a team of linguists and communication specialists began analyzing potential communication frequencies. In Cape Town, quantum encryption experts prepared adaptive communication protocols. From Montreal to Melbourne, from Beijing to Buenos Aires, humanity's best minds worked in perfect, synchronized harmony. Dr. Rodriguez noticed something peculiar in the alien ship's scanning pattern. Most species would miss the subtle inconsistencies, but her team had spent years studying potential extraterrestrial reconnaissance techniques. The scan was methodical, almost predictable, and that made it dangerous. "Begin passive response protocol," she instructed, her voice calm and steady. Across the planet, a series of carefully designed responses began to activate. Satellite networks adjusted their positions. Quantum-encrypted communication channels opened and closed in microsecond intervals. To the Zortak sensors, Earth would appear both completely vulnerable and subtly, inexplicably complex. The command deck of the alien vessel grew quiet. Something was not proceeding according to standard protocol. The scanning algorithms were returning inconsistent data. Resource maps seemed to shift and change. Defensive capabilities appeared simultaneously primitive and incomprehensibly advanced. Captain Voss felt the first tremor of uncertainty. This was not going to be a simple planetary acquisition. Something about this blue planet was different. Something about these humans was unexpected. and the Zortak Collective was about to learn exactly how different humanity could be. The transmission arrived precisely 3 hours, 17 minutes, and 42 seconds after the Zortak ship entered Earth's solar system. A cold, clinical directive that had successfully subjugated countless civilizations across the galaxy. The message was a masterpiece of bureaucratic intimidation, a standard acquisition protocol that had never failed the Zortak Collective. Inhabitants of Planetary System Solar 3. The message began, its translated words crisp and emotionless. Your civilization has been identified as a pre-stellar species eligible for immediate integration. Surrender of all planetary and orbital resources is mandatory. Resistance will result in complete societal reconfiguration. You have 12 standard chronological units to comply. In the underground communications center of the Global Planetary Defense Command, Dr. Marcus Chen studied the transmission with the intensity of a surgeon examining a complex medical challenge. Around him, a team of the world's most brilliant linguists, diplomats, and communication experts worked with methodical precision. "It's fascinating," Chen murmured, adjusting his glasses. "They've used a communication structure that's been consistent across at least 17 documented planetary acquisitions." Dr. Sarah Kwan, a xenolinguistic expert, nodded. Her fingers danced across a holographic interface, breaking down the alien message into its most fundamental components. Linguistic patterns suggest absolute confidence. They expect immediate capitulation. The team knew they had a narrow window, not just to respond, but to respond in a way that would completely upend the Zortak's expectations. This was more than a diplomatic challenge. It was a strategic masterpiece waiting to be composed. Chen began to construct the response. Each word was carefully selected, each phrase meticulously crafted. The human response would use the Zortak's own communication protocols against them, a linguistic judo that would turn their message into a complex legal labyrinth. The first layer was deceptively simple. The response acknowledged receipt of the transmission, while simultaneously introducing a series of nested diplomatic queries. Where the Zortak expected a straightforward surrender, they would receive a document so intricate that it would require extensive legal review. "Notice the recursive clauses," Chen explained to his colleagues. "We're embedding legal challenges within cultural inquiries, wrapped in diplomatic protocol." The message referenced obscure interstellar legal frameworks, invoked hypothetical diplomatic precedents, and introduced cultural context that would force the Zortak to pause and reconsider their approach. It was a communication designed not to communicate, but to confuse and delay. Dr. Kwan added layers of linguistic complexity, subtle grammatical structures that would require extensive computational analysis, cultural references that would seem innocuous but would trigger extensive research protocols in the alien communication systems. "They'll spend weeks just trying to fully parse our response," she said with a slight smile. On the Zortak command ship, communication specialists began to process the human transmission. What should have been a simple acknowledgement of surrender became an increasingly complex puzzle. Translation algorithms struggled. Cultural analysis protocols went into overdrive. Captain Lyra Voss watched as her communication team became progressively more confused. "What is the status of the human response?" she demanded. The lead communication officer looked genuinely perplexed. "We are still analyzing the transmission, Captain. The linguistic complexity is unprecedented." This was humanity's first strategic move, not a show of military might, but an intellectual defense so complex that it transformed communication itself into a weapon. The Zortak Collective had encountered resistance before. They had faced military challenges, technological barriers, diplomatic complications, but they had never encountered a species that could turn a simple communication into such an elaborate strategic defense. What the aliens didn't realize was that this was just the beginning. Humanity was about to show them that true power lies not in force, but in intelligence, creativity, and the ability to transform any interaction into an opportunity for strategic advantage. The communication trap was set, and the Zortak were walking right into it. The first alien probe arrived with the silent precision of a predatory machine. Its sleek design reflected years of advanced engineering, a technological marvel that had successfully gathered intelligence on countless civilizations. The Zortak believed it to be their most advanced reconnaissance device, a quantum-linked scanner capable of penetrating even the most sophisticated planetary defenses. Deep within a high-security research facility nestled in the Swiss Alps, Dr. Elena Rodriguez watched the incoming probe with a calm that belied the complexity of the moment. Around her, a team of the world's most brilliant engineers and computer scientists moved with synchronized precision. "Incoming quantum signature detected," announced Michael Chen, the lead systems analyst. His fingers danced across a holographic interface that seemed to breathe with living intelligence. Scanning protocols initiating. What the Zortak didn't know was that humanity had been preparing for this moment for decades. The facility was more than a research center. It was the culmination of a global effort to create an adaptive defense system that was less a weapon and more a living, thinking entity. The probe began its initial scan, its advanced sensors prodding the planet's defenses. Quantum entanglement algorithms activated, seeking to map Earth's technological infrastructure. But something was different. Instead of presenting a clear, predictable technological landscape, the probe encountered a defense system that seemed to flow and change with liquid grace. Dr. Rodriguez had developed an adaptive interface that did more than defend. It studied, learned, and responded. As the alien probe's scanning beams touched Earth's defensive network, they were gently redirected. Not blocked, not destroyed, but subtly manipulated. "Initiate quantum reflection protocol," she commanded softly. The probe's own advanced technologies began to work against it. Its scanning algorithms became a conduit for misinformation. Complex data streams twisted and reshaped, creating a cascade of false information that would take the Zortak weeks to unravel. On the alien command ship, alarm bells began to sound. The reconnaissance probe was sending back increasingly bizarre and contradictory data. Resource maps shifted impossibly. Planetary defenses appeared simultaneously primitive and incomprehensibly advanced. Captain Lyra Voss studied the incoming reports with growing concern. "Explain," she demanded of her technical team. The lead technical officer looked genuinely perplexed. "The probe's quantum entanglement systems are compromised. The planetary defense network is responding in ways our algorithms cannot predict." What was happening was unprecedented. Humanity had created a defensive system that was more than a simple technological barrier. It was an adaptive, intelligent network that could think, learn, and respond in real time. Each of the probe's attempts to gather information became an opportunity for Earth's defense system to learn. Quantum processors worked at speeds incomprehensible to traditional computing, analyzing and redirecting the alien technology's own capabilities. Dr. Rodriguez watched a real-time visualization of the technological dance. Streams of data flowed like rivers of light, bending and reshaping with each alien probe's attempt to scan the planet. It was a symphony of technology, with humanity conducting an intricate performance that left the Zortak completely bewildered. "We're not just defending," she explained to her team. "We're teaching them a lesson about the nature of technological intelligence." The probe began to experience cascading system failures, not through direct attack, but through a subtle manipulation of its own quantum communication protocols. Its advanced sensors became conduits of confusion, its precision instruments now broadcasting conflicting and impossible data. On the Zortak command ship, panic began to spread. This was not the expected resistance of a pre-stellar civilization. This was something entirely different, a level of technological sophistication that defied their understanding. As the probe drifted helplessly, its systems gradually going dark, humanity had delivered its first clear message. "We are not what you expected." The technological symphony was complete, and the Zortak were only beginning to understand the complexity of the challenge they had undertaken. The human response was nothing like the Zortak had ever encountered. While most civilizations relied on physical defenses or direct confrontation, Dr. Nathan Okoro was crafting something far more nuanced, a psychological campaign that would slowly unravel the aliens' collective resolve. The Global Cultural Intelligence Division was a marvel of interdisciplinary collaboration. Psychologists worked alongside linguists, anthropologists, media specialists, and communication experts. Their mission was simple yet impossibly complex. Understand the Zortak at a fundamental psychological level, and then systematically dismantle their collective confidence. Dr. Okoro studied the holographic displays that mapped the Zortak's known cultural and psychological frameworks. Centuries of galactic conquests had created a specific psychological profile, a collective mindset built on absolute certainty and hierarchical control. Every successful invasion begins with psychological dominance, he explained to his team. They believe in their inherent superiority. We're going to challenge that belief at its most fundamental level. The first wave of psychological intervention was subtle. Carefully crafted media broadcasts began to penetrate the Zortak communication networks. These weren't traditional messages of resistance, but intricate psychological triggers designed to create doubt and uncertainty. In the communication centers of the Zortak command ship, strange anomalies began to appear. Intercepted communications seemed to contradict the fundamental beliefs of their invasion protocol. Historical records appeared that challenged their understanding of planetary acquisitions. Subtle linguistic nuances introduced cognitive dissonance into their communication systems. Captain Lyra Voss noticed the first signs of internal tension. Her communication officers became increasingly agitated, arguing about the interpretation of intercepted human messages. Where there had once been absolute unity, now existed uncertainty. Dr. Okoro's team had identified the critical weakness in the Zortak collective psychology. They were a species that valued absolute certainty above all else. By introducing calculated uncertainty, they could create psychological fractures that would spread like a virus through the alien civilization. Communication analysts on the Zortak ship began to report increasingly bizarre findings. Some messages seemed to suggest multiple contradictory interpretations. Others introduced cultural references that defied their existing understanding of emerging civilizations. It's as if they're speaking multiple languages simultaneously, one frustrated communication officer reported. What the Zortak didn't realize was that each message was a carefully constructed psychological weapon. Dr. Okoro had assembled a team that understood the deepest principles of cross-cultural communication, cognitive psychology, and information warfare. Strategic misinformation became an art form. Not lies, but carefully constructed narratives that would cause the Zortak to question everything they believed about planetary acquisition. Historical precedents were subtly reinterpreted. Invasion protocols were gently challenged. The psychological campaign went deeper. The team began to introduce communication patterns that mimicked the Zortak's own communication style, but with subtle variations that would create cognitive dissonance. Each message was a puzzle, each transmission a psychological trap. On the Zortak command ship, the first signs of internal conflict emerged. Discussions became heated. Certainty began to crack. The absolute confidence that had defined their previous conquests started to erode. "We're not fighting them with weapons," Dr. Okoro explained to his team. "We're fighting them with understanding." Every message is a surgical strike against their collective psychology. The truly brilliant aspect of the strategy was its adaptability. As the Zortak attempted to analyze and counter each psychological approach, the human team would already be several steps ahead, introducing new cognitive challenges. What began as a potential invasion was transforming into a complex psychological engagement. The Zortak were discovering that humanity's greatest weapon was not technology or military might, but the ability to understand, adapt, and challenge fundamental beliefs. Captain Voss stared at the communication displays, a sense of unease growing. For the first time in her long career, she felt something she had never experienced before: doubt. The psychological landscape was shifting. and humanity was redrawing the boundaries of conflict. The Global Economic Response Room looked more like a high-tech mission control than a financial center. Massive holographic displays surrounded a circular platform where the world's most brilliant economic strategists worked in perfect synchronization. Dr. Elena Rodriguez, head of the Global Economic Defense Unit, stood at the center, her eyes scanning multiple data streams that represented the intricate web of galactic economic systems. First phase economic disruption initiated, announced Michael Chen, the lead quantum economic analyst. His fingers moved with surgical precision across holographic interfaces that seemed to breathe with living intelligence. What the Zortak didn't understand was that humanity had been preparing for this moment for decades. This was not just a national effort, but a global coordination that transformed the entire planet's economic infrastructure into a dynamic, adaptive organism. The strategy was multilayered and brilliantly complex. Instead of direct confrontation, the human economic team would use the Zortak's own economic systems against them. They began by identifying the critical resource networks that supported the alien civilization's expansion. Quantum-encrypted algorithms started to move through galactic trade networks, not to destroy, but to subtly manipulate. Trading routes shifted imperceptibly. Resource valuations began to fluctuate in ways that defied standard economic predictions. The Zortak's vast economic empire found itself facing something it had never encountered, an economic defense system that was more fluid than any military strategy. On the Zortak command ship, economic advisors began to report increasingly alarming findings. Their standard resource acquisition protocols were failing. Planets that had always been reliable sources of raw materials were suddenly showing unexpected economic resistance. Trade routes that had been consistent for centuries began to shift and change. It's as if the entire economic landscape is becoming unpredictable, one frustrated economic advisor reported to Captain Lyra Voss. The human team had identified the critical weakness in the Zortak's economic model. Their civilization relied on absolute predictability, a rigid system of resource extraction and distribution that had worked for centuries. By introducing calculated uncertainty, they could create economic fractures that would spread like a complex virus. Dr. Rodriguez explained the strategy to her team. We're not destroying their economic system. We're teaching it to be something it has never been before: adaptable. Cryptocurrency algorithms developed by the team began to infiltrate galactic financial networks. These were not simple digital currencies, but complex economic entities that could change their fundamental value based on multiple dynamic factors. The Zortak financial analysis systems found themselves confronting an economic model that defied their understanding. Strategic economic pressure points were identified and gently manipulated, not through direct conflict, but through a complex dance of financial algorithms that could predict and counter the Zortak's economic moves before they were even made. The global economic team had transformed economic warfare into an art form. They weren't just defending, they were demonstrating a fundamentally different approach to economic interaction. Smaller civilizations that had long been subjugated by the Zortak began to take notice. The economic resistance wasn't just a defensive strategy. It was creating opportunities for those who had been marginalized. We're rewriting the rules of economic engagement, Dr. Rodriguez told her team. This is about more than just defending Earth. This is about creating a new model of galactic economic cooperation. On the Zortak command ship, panic began to spread. Their invasion was no longer just a military challenge. It had become an existential economic threat to their entire civilization. The massive economic displays in the Human Defense Center showed the progression of their strategy, not as a series of aggressive moves, but as a complex, living system that could adapt and respond in real time. Captain Voss stared at the economic reports, a growing sense of unease spreading through her command. For the first time, the absolute certainty of the Zortak collective began to crack. The economic battlefield was shifting, and humanity was redrawing the boundaries of galactic economic interaction. The diplomatic conference room was unlike any meeting space in galactic history. Representatives from a dozen oppressed civilizations sat around a circular table, their various physiological differences a testament to the diversity of the universe. At the center stood Dr. Marcus Chen, humanity's lead diplomatic strategist, his calm demeanor a sharp contrast to the tension that had brought them together. "We're not here to form a traditional alliance," Chen began, his voice translated through advanced linguistic algorithms that captured the nuanced meaning behind each word. "We're here to fundamentally change how civilizations interact." The Zortak Collective had long maintained their galactic dominance through a complex system of economic subjugation and strategic intimidation. Smaller civilizations had learned to survive by becoming invisible, by accepting the role of resource providers and silent subjects. But humanity's resistance was changing everything. Representatives from the Krellneri mining colonies leaned forward, their crystalline communication appendages trembling with anticipation. The Voran diplomatic envoy, a being of pure energy contained within an intricate environmental suit, pulsed with a frequency that suggested intense curiosity. Dr. Sarah Kwan, the xenocultural expert, had spent years preparing for this moment. The human approach was not about military might or direct confrontation. It was about creating a new framework of galactic interaction, one based on mutual respect, shared development, and collective growth. "Each of your civilizations has been systematically marginalized," Chen continued. "The Zortak system is not just a threat to us. It's a threat to the fundamental principles of galactic cooperation." The diplomatic team had meticulously prepared. They understood the unique challenges of each civilization represented in the room. The Krellneri had lost nearly 70% of their planetary resources to Zortak extraction protocols. The Voran had been forced into a perpetual state of technological suppression. What humanity offered was more than just resistance. It was a complete reimagining of galactic relations. Technical displays began to show how humanity's defensive strategies could be adapted to help these civilizations. Economic models demonstrated how resource sharing could replace resource extraction. Communication protocols revealed methods of preserving cultural integrity while promoting mutual understanding. The Zortak had always believed their system was invincible. They saw themselves as galactic administrators, bringing order to chaotic planetary systems. What they didn't understand was that true cooperation required respect, not control. One by one, the representatives began to see a different possibility. The human approach was not about defeating the Zortak through force, but about creating an alternative that made their current system obsolete. Dr. Nathan Okoro, the psychological strategy expert, had predicted this moment. Resistance is not about destruction, he had told his team. It's about presenting a more compelling vision of existence. The diplomatic session continued for hours. Complex negotiations gave way to collaborative planning. Each civilization brought its unique strengths to the table. The Krellneri's advanced mining technologies, the Voran's energy manipulation capabilities, humanity's adaptive communication and economic strategies. Captain Lyra Voss, monitoring the situation from the Zortak command ship, could not comprehend what was happening. Her intelligence reports showed something unprecedented: the emergence of a collaborative network that defied all previous galactic interaction models. "They're not just resisting," she heard her chief diplomatic officer say. "They're rebuilding the entire concept of galactic civilization." As the conference concluded, something extraordinary had been created. Not a traditional military alliance, but a network of civilizations committed to a new way of existing. Each member brought its unique perspective, its distinctive capabilities. The Zortak had always seen diversity as a weakness to be controlled. Humanity was showing that diversity was the greatest strength of all. When the representatives finally departed, they carried with them more than diplomatic agreements. They carried a new understanding of what was possible. The stars seemed to whisper a new truth. Resistance was not about fighting. It was about imagining something better. The moment had arrived. Years of preparation, layers of strategic planning, and a comprehensive approach to resistance converged in a confrontation that would redefine galactic interactions. Admiral Marcus Rodriguez stood in the Global Planetary Defense Command Center, a holographic representation of the solar system spinning slowly around him. The wall of screens displayed a complex network of information, economic flows, communication channels, diplomatic connections, and technological defenses, all interlinked in a living, breathing system. Captain Lyra Voss of the Zortak Collective watched in growing horror as her carefully planned invasion began to unravel. What had seemed like a simple planetary acquisition had transformed into a comprehensive challenge to everything her civilization believed about galactic dominance. The confrontation was not a traditional battle. No massive fleets would clash. No planetary bombardments would occur. This was a multi-layered assault that struck at the very core of the Zortak's systemic approach to planetary conquest. Dr. Nathan Okoro's psychological warfare team had systematically introduced doubt into the Zortak communication networks. Their allies, the Krelnari, the Vorin, and several other previously subjugated civilizations, began to activate carefully prepared economic and diplomatic countermeasures. Initiate comprehensive response protocol, Rodriguez commanded. The first wave was economic. Quantum encrypted algorithms began to systematically dismantle the Zortak's resource acquisition networks. Trading routes that had been stable for centuries suddenly became unpredictable. Resource valuations fluctuated in ways that defied standard economic predictions. On the Zortak command ship, economic advisors watched in disbelief as their carefully constructed financial systems began to collapse. It wasn't a direct attack. It was a complex manipulation that turned the Zortak's own economic mechanisms against themselves. Simultaneously, the diplomatic network that humanity had carefully constructed began to activate. Smaller civilizations that had long been under Zortak control started to assert their independence. Communication channels opened, sharing strategies of resistance that the Zortak had never anticipated. The technological defense system that Dr. Elena Rodriguez had developed came into full effect. Alien scanning technologies found themselves redirected, their own advanced systems becoming conduits of misinformation. Each attempt to gather intelligence became an opportunity for Earth's defense network to learn and adapt. "They're not fighting us," one frustrated Zortak technical officer reported. "They're teaching us." The psychological warfare reached its peak. Carefully crafted communication patterns introduced levels of complexity that the Zortak collective mind struggled to comprehend. Their absolute certainty began to crack, replaced by a growing sense of uncertainty. Captain Voss realized the true nature of the confrontation. This was not a battle to be won through traditional means. This was a comprehensive dismantling of the Zortak's entire approach to galactic interaction. Earth's response was a symphony of interconnected strategies. Economic systems flowed into diplomatic networks. Technological defenses supported psychological interventions. Each layer of defense was not just a barrier, but an opportunity to demonstrate a fundamentally different approach to civilization. The Zortak invasion protocol, which had successfully subjugated countless civilizations, found itself completely ineffective. Every standard approach was met with a response that defied their understanding. Where they expected submission, they found innovation. Where they anticipated weakness, they encountered strength. Dr. Michael Chen, the lead communication strategist, watched the final stages of the confrontation with a sense of calm determination. "We're not just defending," he explained to his team. "We're showing them a different way of existing." As the confrontation reached its zenith, the Zortak collective found itself facing a comprehensive defeat unlike any in its history. It wasn't a military triumph, but a systematic deconstruction of their entire approach to galactic interaction. The stars seemed to hold their breath. Humanity had done more than resist an invasion. They had fundamentally challenged the existing model of galactic civilization. Captain Voss stared at the communication displays, a profound sense of transformation washing over her. The absolute certainty that had defined the Zortak collective was gone, replaced by something entirely unexpected. Resistance had become revolution. The aftermath of the confrontation was unlike anything the galaxy had ever witnessed. In a vast conference chamber that floated in neutral space, Representatives from multiple civilizations gathered to witness the transformation of galactic governance. Dr. Marcus Rodriguez stood at the center of the circular platform, his presence both calm and resolute. The Zortak Collective, once the most feared civilization in the known universe, sat in a carefully arranged section, no longer conquerors, but participants in a new dialogue. Captain Lyra Voss, who had led the initial invasion attempt, now represented her people in a way she could never have imagined. The absolute certainty that had defined the Zortak's approach to galactic interaction had been completely dismantled. "We are not here to punish," Rodriguez began, his voice translated across multiple linguistic spectrums. "We are here to establish a new framework of mutual understanding and cooperative development." The newly formed Galactic Cooperative Council represented a radical departure from previous models of interstellar interaction. It was not a traditional alliance, but a dynamic network of civilizations committed to shared growth, mutual respect, and collective problem-solving. Dr. Sarah Kwan, the xenocultural expert who had been instrumental in designing the new framework, explained the core principles. Each civilization would maintain its unique cultural identity while contributing to a larger, more comprehensive understanding of galactic existence. The Zortak found themselves facing a complete systemic transformation. Their entire approach to planetary exploration and resource acquisition was being fundamentally reimagined. No longer could they view other civilizations as resources to be extracted or territories to be conquered. Economic models were the first to be restructured. The new framework introduced a cooperative resource-sharing system that valued long-term sustainability over short-term extraction. Planets would be viewed as living ecosystems, not mere resource pools. The culinary mining colonies, which had long suffered under Zortak exploitation, now became key contributors to a new approach to technological and resource development. Their advanced mining technologies would be shared, not seized. Communication protocols underwent a complete transformation. The new system prioritized cultural understanding, linguistic preservation, and mutual learning. Translation technologies developed during the conflict became tools of connection rather than control. Dr. Nathan Okoro's psychological research team had documented the entire process. Their findings revealed something profound. Civilizations that learned to collaborate were far more resilient than those that sought to dominate. "This is not about weakness," Okoro explained to the assembled representatives. "This is about recognizing the strength that comes from diverse perspectives and mutual respect." The Voran diplomatic envoy, a being of pure energy contained within an intricate environmental suit, demonstrated the new communication protocols. Their unique method of energy-based communication was now seen as a valuable perspective, not an anomaly to be suppressed. Captain Voss spoke for the first time, her voice carrying the weight of a fundamental transformation. "We believed control was strength," she said. "We now understand that adaptability is true power." The new galactic framework included several revolutionary concepts: a universal communication network that preserved cultural nuances, a cooperative resource management system, mutual defense protocols that prioritized prevention over conquest, a comprehensive knowledge-sharing platform. Technological development would no longer be a competition, but a collaborative effort. The advanced defense systems that humanity had developed would become tools of protection for all participating civilizations. Dr. Elena Rodriguez presented the final architectural designs for the new Galactic Cooperative Network. It was a living, adaptive system that could grow and change with the collective needs of its members. As the conference concluded, something extraordinary had been achieved. The Zortak Collective had not been destroyed, but transformed. Humanity had not conquered, but reimagined the very concept of galactic interaction. The stars seemed to pulse with a new energy. Civilizations that had been isolated and oppressed now found themselves part of a larger, more compassionate framework. Resistance had become revolution. Conquest had become cooperation. And the galaxy would never be the same again.